Hi guys, it's Janae and welcome back to my channel, and today I am doing a read-along, continuing my read-along for ErHa Volume 5, and yeah, I am excited to be we're kind of closing in on the end. I feel we're about halfway through now. No, not halfway through. We're about 100 pages near the end. Hi! And yeah, I'm hoping we'll get a good amount done tonight. I do want to warn you guys. So my parents and I were out to dinner. We went home separately, but I think they're here now. So I've let my dog out to go greet them. It sounds like they're here. But if I'm wrong, for some reason, I'm gonna have to go and fetch her back. But I think they're here. Yeah, they're here. Okay, sorry about that. If you hear her being excited, yeah, that's a thing. Anyway, hi. Okay, whew, calm down. I have my coffee here with me. We're gonna motor through and see if I can do the full 2 hours. I really hope I can tonight. And yeah, let me quickly pull up where we were at. So we were at the top of page 201 for anyone who wants to follow along with their own copies. Chapter 172, Shizun doesn't eat children, which again, just so comforting. I mean, technically, I suppose it is comforting because he doesn't eat children. It's not like the chapter says Shizun eats children, but it implies that that's not expected, that it's not the norm to not eat children. Yeah, anyway, one thing I did want to mention is I am thinking about potentially moving the Thursday streams to Wednesday so that I don't run into this problem as often. Because, Thursdays are generally our going out to dinner nights, but I'm not sure how you guys would feel about that. So if you prefer Wednesdays, let me know. If you prefer Thursdays, let me know as well. Just so that I can make a good judgment call either way. But yeah, I feel like I've talked enough. I'm Janae, I read down May. We're currently reading ErHa, and we take a 10-minute break on the hour or close to the hour. And I think that's about it. So we can get started. The gales the gun had stirred spread apocalyptic fire over most of Ligny. The cultivators who had come for the wedding fled on their swords in every direction, the merciless flames nipping at their heels. Any cultivator who depleted their spiritual energy lost the race and met their end swallowed by the inferno. The escaping cultivators overflew many of the villages clustered around Rufeng's lofty cities. These commoners from the upper cultivation realm were struck with horror when they saw the great fire slowly approaching from the direction of Rufeng's sect. The panicking families picked up and to flee. But what means did they have to escape this conflagration bearing down like a flow of lava? Okay, whatever works for you best should be fine. Okay, I mean, if you do have a preference, let me know. It's always good to kind of know, but I will bear that in mind. Dad, Daddy, Daddy! The cries and shouts of the villagers rose as they passed over. Shu Zhengyong and the others expanded their weapons to their maximum sizes, and each pulled aboard a full load of commoners. Madame Wang murmured a continuous stream of comforting words. Don't cry, all of you, don't cry. Slide on over and sit in the middle. Be careful, hold on tight to each other, don't fall. But the iron fan couldn't be expanded any further, and there were too many in the village who couldn't be saved. Kneeling at the front, Zhengyong leaned over to grab another wailing child. But as he tried to pull them up, the iron fan shuddered violently, unable to bear the additional weight. He had no choice but to let go and watch helplessly as that tear-stained, hopeful face was swiftly flung far behind. Xu Zhengyong was a man of steely resolve, but he couldn't help howling in grief. Why? Why? Because one man was treated unfairly, he must drag all these innocents to the grave. He wept, tears rolling down his frank face, as if this world isn't already enough of a mess, as if there aren't enough people who died in vain. The sad reality that this was what he probably thought of Moran in an alternative life is grim. Madame Wang's eyes were also reddened. She cradled a rescued child in each arm. Both children's parents had pushed them onto the iron fan, but had been consumed by the flames before they themselves could climb to safety. The children sobbed in Madame Wang's embrace as she patted their small heads. What comfort could she offer them? She knew not what to say. She looked behind her. Out of the 10 or so cultivators who had been following them, several had disappeared, having succumbed to the fires. Others had set out in different directions altogether, like Chuaning and Moran. She silently prayed for their safety, her eyes filled with tears. Not far away, Jiang Shi carried the still unconscious Shu Meng. The fire's glow playing over his graceful features. His beautiful sword was ill-suited to carrying a heavy load, and buzzed incessantly beneath his feet. Jiang Shi glared at Shu Meng disdainfully. He'd been tempted to throw the brat off into the flames several times, but when he saw Madame Wang's imploring expression from the iron fan, he gloomily pursed his lips and held him steady. Xu Zhengyong was weeping as he tried to pull a younger and lighter child onto the fan, but however dearly he wished for it, his weapon had nothing left to give. He once again let go of a hand. Oh, guys, I was not prepared for the emo hours. Oh my word. Okay. And just like the stunningness, the sadness, but the stunningness of this illustration is quite something. Like, I know that there's a massive age gap, and therefore I kind of don't want to ship it, but also I kind of ship Jiangxi and Shumeng, and I don't know how ill-advised that is. And I know now is not the time to be thinking about it, but this illustration of him, like, Princess carrying Shumeng is just something. On the verge of breaking down, still kneeling, he curled in on himself, the inadequacy of his own strength tearing him apart. At that precise moment, a rosy light flashed. Jiang Shi waved his hand, radiant shining from his sleeve, and lifted the girl Xu Zhengyong couldn't pick up onto his own sword. The buzzing sound from the resplendent Shu Huang grew even louder. Short-tempered, Jiang Shi stomped on his blade and snapped, "What are you complaining for? If you've got the balls, you can stop here and wait for the fire to burn you up." Sure enough, Shu Huang went silent. He's got a temperamental sword, and that is brilliant. My goodness. Um, it sailed ahead with Jiang Shi and the other 2 passengers without another peep, though the slender sword really did look like it might break under the strain at any moment. Jiang Shi drew near to Xu Zhengyong and shot him a contemptuous glare. "What's a grown man like you crying about?" he said sharply. "If you can save them, then do it. If you can't, then don't. Why make a scene?" "'Cause some people aren't as steel-hearted as you, Jiang Shi. Damn." "Chidi," murmured Madame Wang. "Am I wrong?" Jiang Shi sneered. Although he was handsome, the malicious curve of his mouth made him look terribly cold. If you'd stayed at Guyu instead of leaving with him, how would you be so feeble now? You can't even ride your own sword. If you weren't sitting on that fan, your heroic savior of a husband would be able to rescue someone else. Ow! Like, cruel. Really cruel. Madame Wang seemed stung by these words. She lowered her face and slowly closed her eyes in silence. Far in the opposite direction, Moran had also expanded his sword to an enormous size. In addition to Chuaning, it now carried a full load of commoners from the upper cultivation realm. The refugees shivered and sniffled, watching blankly as their homes were swallowed by the sea of fire and burned to the ground. They closed their eyes and broke down in mournful sobs, their tears reflecting the flames. Moran remained silent in this grave atmosphere. Unlike Xu Zhengyong, he hadn't sought out pointless struggles. He knew he couldn't carry any more, so he no longer looked down at the wailing, screaming villagers rushing by beneath him. His brow furrowed slightly. The coast is up ahead. Shizun, where should we go? Can you make it a flying flower isle? Can you make it to Flying Flower Isle? Flying Flower Isle was the island closest to Linyi in the upper cultivation realm. Moran nodded. I'll make it, but I'm not too familiar with the East Sea, so I'll need to focus on navigation. Shizun, keep an eye on everyone and make sure they stay awake. It's crowded up here. If someone falls asleep, they might slip overboard. How can you fall asleep in this dire situation? I'm just asking for a friend. Like, that would be a good trick to know for insomniacs. Okay, Chuaning agreed. Moran pressed ahead for more than 2 hours. As dawn glimmered pale on the horizon and the sun emerged in the east, they broke through the clouds and saw a modest ring-shaped island, surrounded by sparkling jade green waters. Okay, to be fair, it's 2 hours. Like, exhaustion, like emotional exhaustion, could make you pass out. So much tragedy, and the man can't keep his disdain at bay. Yeah, like, it's alarming. And again, it is so frustrating because it's like this didn't need to happen, and it feels so like spiteful. But then again, we have Moran who was okay with doing something very similar in his past life. So I just, it's hard because you know on the one hand that, like, I love Moran, so how am I judging the other guy whose name I cannot not remember? But then at the same time, I still want to judge him. So anyway, but I just wonder how long this fire is gonna continue. Cause isn't there a way to stop it at all? At last they'd arrived at Flying Flower Isle. Although this island fell under the acres, I'm not sure, of roofing sect, it was remote and sparsely populated. Most of the residents were independent fishermen who lived off the sea, and there was only one family of any wealth. The islanders had anxiously spotted the huge fire engulfing roofing sect as a bloody glow on the horizon across the raging surf. No one knew what had happened. Many watched from their doorstep, too afraid to sleep for fear that the flames would soon blanket their own skies. By daybreak, that strange phenomena hadn't reached their island. Instead, a vast dark sword carrying a crowd of people touched down on a shoal. As, at its helm was a tall and dashing young man, his cheeks stained with streaks of dried blood as if he'd had endured a fierce battle. Flying far. Wow, that is gonna trip me up quite a few times. Be prepared. Flying Flower Isle had no cultivators, and its leaders were all ordinary people. Everyone was frightened by the sight. They didn't know if this man was friend or foe, or why he had come. Why are their faces all sooty? I mean, you guys literally see the flames engulfing in the distance and you wonder why their faces are sooty? One of the villagers muttered, peering at the assorted crowd behind Moran. Must have come out of that big fire. Did they fly here from Linyi? A broad-shouldered fisherman gathered his courage and approached the strangers. Are you all from Rufung sect? Shizun Peak, Moran passed the child in his arms to Chuaning. The toddler was too young to stay awake through the night, so Moran had carried him in his arms the whole way to ensure he wouldn't be crowded off the sword. There was some trouble at Rufung sect, and these are all residents of Linyi. The apocalyptic fire was too powerful, and the sword could only carry so many. I couldn't save many of them. Moran had babbled out half of this explanation before he looked up and saw the fisherman's bewildered expression. He realized he was speaking too quickly. How would the residents of Flying Flower Isle know anything about apocalyptic fire or the limitations of sword riding techniques? He pressed his lips together, then said gently, "I'm sorry. I'll explain the details later." He turned towards the exhausted, defeated crowd behind him. "Could you first get them some food or water?" One of the orphan children had come close, helpless with panic. He slowly nudged Moran's leg and reached up, tugging the corner of his robe with a tiny hand. Moran looked down and patted him on the head. "I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience," he said to the fisherman. Most of the islanders were kind-hearted. The tea and food were quickly brought over. Moran briefly summarized the story. They gaped in astonishment, staring blankly at the unbroken lines of firelight on the horizon. "Rufung sect burned down?" someone said incredulously. "Nangkong Jangmin is dead?" "He isn't dead. He was given a lin chi fruit and taken away," said Moran. "What's a lin chi fruit?" "That's a..." Chuaning watched from the sidelines as Moran patiently explained to the fisherman. He didn't step forward himself. He was perfectly aware that he looked uncaring by nature, his features chilled as if by frost. It would be far better to leave Moran to handle the locals. The child he held had begun to stir. On waking to find himself in the arms of the cold-looking stranger, he started and began to wail. Gone was all the docility he'd shown in Moran's arms. Chuaning glanced over at Moran. He was still engrossed in conversation with the locals, leaving Chuaning to fend for himself. Out of habit, he put on a stern expression and told the child, "Don't cry." "That is definitely gonna work, Chuaning." The child's wails rose in pitch. "Daddy, Mommy," he cried over and over. "I want my daddy. I want my mommy." "Don't cry." Chuaning stiffly tried to comfort him. "You don't cry." "I want my mommy. Mommy." With one hand occupied holding the child, Chuaning lifted his other to pat him on the head. The child jerked back, avoiding his touch. His face was bright red, covered in tears and snot as he wailed, "I want my mommy. I want my daddy. I want to go home." Chuaning was at his wits' end. He had never been in a position to comfort a child before, and had no clue what to say. He racked his brain for ways to soothe the boy, but as he sank into thought, a crease formed between his brows, giving him the air of a sword forged of steel, dark and cold as ice. The miserable howling child happened to glimpse Chuaning's expression as he kicked and struggled. So terrifying was the sight that he instantly choked on his sobs, unable to make another sound. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but I feel so bad, and at the same time it's so funny. Mm. He bit his lip, great round tears rolling from his eyes like a broken string of pearls. Suddenly, Chuaning remembered something. He untied his Qiankun pouch from his free hand and pulled with his free hand and pulled out a sticky rice candy. After peeling off the paper wrapper, he handed it to the child. The child hiccuped. Eyes swimming with tears, he looked silently at Chuaning, then at the candy in his hand. Like most children, his mother had raised him on folk tales. No few featured scary cultivators who snatched away disobedient children to feed them sleeping potions before refining them into pearls of immortality. Oh, great. Now he has, like, folktale to contend with as well. The child silently held back his tears and stared at Chuaning in terror. Chuaning stared blankly back, still holding up the sticky rice candy. He didn't get it. His phoenix eyes were slightly upturned, their ends long and slender. Such eyes were beautiful, but they appeared haughty and calculating when he wasn't smiling. Even with a slight smile, his eyes imparted the wildness of a thorny rose, prickly and arrogant, but most wouldn't appreciate such arrogance. Chuaning's face was handsome, but strangers naturally didn't find it likable, and especially not strange children. I feel like this poor man can't win. Eat this. Chuaning had watched Moran produce candy to pacify several children while they were on the sword. He was only following his example. He had no idea why this candy was unacceptable. I feel so bad. The child pressed his lips closed. He hesitated, trembling, then slowly shook his head. He didn't want to be refined into immortality pills. Don't you... Before Chuaning could say more, the child broke down sobbing in fright, his cries so heart-rending that everyone around them looked over. Chuaning hadn't time to react. Still holding up the sticky rice candy, he murmured, "Like sweets?" Between the sounds of his own sobs, the child misheard Chuaning's tentative question as, don't you don't you look sweet?" In his little brain, he had come to the definitive conclusion that this cultivator wanted to refine him into pills, into very sweet pills of immortality, no less. He was so panicked he began bawling hysterically at the top of his lungs. Chuaning stood stiff as a board. Oh my goodness. Like, this is hilarious. I kind of love and appreciate this because that previous bit of the scene was terribly tough to read, and this was just a nice palate cleanser of Chuaning being so incompetent and yet so well intentioned. Incompetent is not even the right word for it, but damn. Okay. Next chapter. Chapter 173. Shizun. Someone wants to chase us away. At least now the title of the previous chapter makes sense. Because I was really wondering how that would come about to be relevant. Chuaning felt like he was caught holding a hot potato. He had no idea what to do. As more and more eyes turned in his direction, his ears flushed red with embarrassment. At that moment, a pair of hands reached out to take the child from his arms. Chuaning let out a breath of relief and turned. Moran? Moran shifted the child to the crook of one arm. With his free hand, he ruffled Chuaning's hair. His expression was solemn, his features weighed down faintly with melancholy after the tragedy in Ligny. Still, he made an effort to lift the corners of his lips in front of Chuaning, not wishing to show him an unhappy expression. His half-smile wasn't so gallant as usual, but it radiated an indiscernible warmth. All settled with the islanders? All settled. The fire in Ligny probably won't burn itself out for a few days. Days? How many people are gonna die? We should stay on Flying Flower Isle for now, but there aren't many houses on the island, and we've brought so many people. I've asked the village elder. He said there will be room if we double up. Okay. I kind of was hoping that maybe they'd be like, okay, let's go back and fetch more people and come back and like do as many trips as we can. But they're gonna tire themselves out, and if the island can't take more people, then it's a pointless effort. Damn. Moran had always been good at handling such things. He had a knack for getting on well with others. As as for his looks, Chuaning remembered how the girls in Yuliang village had eyed Moran when they'd helped with the rice harvest. Without a doubt, Moran was vastly more likable than he. Chuaning stood in silent thought for a while, unable to identify what he was feeling. He nodded. You've worked hard. No need for that with me. Moran took one look at the candy still in Chuaning's hand and understood what had happened. With a laugh, he turned to comfort the oblivious child in his arms. Hey, you, why are you crying? I want mommy. I want daddy. The child was so young he still walked unsteadily, yet he'd lost both parents forever to the sea of flames. Moran's heart ached as he looked at the boy. He pressed his forehead to the child's and consoled him softly. Your mom and dad have some things to take care of. It'll be a few days before they can come stay with you. Be a good boy now, and they'll be happy when they see you. I don't like that. Like, I don't think you need to tell him, oh, they died, because if he's really as young as the text states, then he won't even be able to conceptualize that necessarily, but maybe just telling them they've gone away for a while and we don't know when they'll be back. Or something like that, because this promise of, oh, they'll be back in a few days creates expectation. I think they also knew it would be too late to go back. Yeah, maybe. Um, the child gradually calmed as Moran howled and soothed him. Although he still sniffled from time to time, he'd stopped screaming and wailing. Still holding the candy, Trunning stood to the side and watched Moran lower his head towards the tearful child. His profile was beautiful, its contours strong and crisp. Were he a watercolor painting, his brush strokes would be vigorous and masterful, an extraordinary composition that effortlessly produced a face without equal. His features were cleanly defined, but his lashes and the eyes that peered through them were soft, like delicate leaves unfurling in spring. Ooh, look at Chuaning pulling out the poetry references for Moran as well. Usually it's just Moran doing it. Chuaning's mind began to wander. When Moran leaned over to take the candy at his fingertips with his mouth. Wait, what? Okay. Chuaning jerked back in surprise, his eyes widening. What are you doing? The sticky rice candy was small. Moran's lips had naturally brushed against Chuaning's fingers when he bit into the candy. In fact, the warm, wet tip of his tongue had even flicked the pads of Chuaning's fingertips by accident. Do any of us buy that that was an accident? Chuaning's whole body went numb. This tiny, fleeting intimacy sent an itch scuttling down his spine, like a tender sprout breaking from its seed and pushing the impassive soil out of the way, pressing against the suffocating earth until it became soft and malleable. Moran grinned at him with the candy between his lips, and then turned to wink at the child. He tossed the candy up to catch it in his mouth, his throat bobbing as he did. See, it's not some scary medicine, he said to the boy. It's only sweets. Chuaning was speechless. Lost in thought, he hadn't been paying attention to Moran's murmured conversation with the boy. Only now did he look back towards the child who was staring at Moran with timid, earnest eyes. "Ah, it's really Candy," he finally said in a tiny, astonished voice. "Yep," Moran smiled. "The cultivator Guga is such a good person. How could he possibly kidnap you and make you into pills?" He knew exactly what the rumors were. Mm-hmm. A very dirty lie. But I mean, I don't like that part's decidedly from Chuaning's perspective, so I don't blame him for being very naive about it. Chuaning thought it better not to respond. The sky was brightening by the time Moran had settled all the refugees. After the shocking occurrences of the night before, he wasn't sleepy at all. He ventured down to the shore of Flying Flower Isle by himself. The tide had receded in the morning, revealing shoals that couldn't be seen in the darkness. Now that he was alone, his worries came rushing to the surface, clouding his thoughts in a haze he couldn't dispel. He slipped off his shoes and walked slowly along the shoreline, leaving two crooked trails in the wet sand. He found many things about Shu Shuanglin inexplicable. For instance, why did he refuse to wear shoes in the dead of winter, walking everywhere bare feet? Moran had hidden much of his past, and people had rarely treated him with kindness. Perhaps that was why he felt he understood why Shu Shangling had put every effort into destroying Rufeng's sect and Jiangdong whole, throwing the entire upper cultivation realm into chaos. The most painful thing in the world wasn't being beaten down or pushed aside. On the contrary, the most painful thing was to be betrayed by those closest to you. It was to be it was to be someone who had been innocent of wrongdoing, someone with a heart bursting with passion, who strove to become a Zongshi of his generation, who then had everyone at the foremost competition in the cultivation world pointing at him, saying he'd stolen his techniques from his older brother, the techniques he'd poured his heart and soul into. He had been buried under the ridicule and contempt, never to rise again. After the present calamity passed, the cultivation world would inevitably have to deal with how the cards had been reshuffled. The sects that had suffered grievous injury, whether to their reputation or to their members, would all think Shu Shuanglin is truly a madman. Perhaps only Mo Wei, who had once himself been a beastly, bloodthirsty murderer, would would stroll along would stroll alone along a peaceful, unbroken stretch of shore and consider just what kind of person was Shu Shuanglin. Had that madman ever exhausted himself training in the tangerine grove when he was young and full of vigor? Had he returned after nightfall, weary and satisfied, with the sweet tangerine tucked into his sleeve for his lazy brother, never knowing that this useless brother's silver tongue would later make him a pariah in the world of cultivation? Had that madman ever been engrossed in reading cultivation scrolls, earnestly loading his brush with ink to pen some naive opinion? Had he bitten into the brush's handle in dissatisfaction, sinking into deep thought, never knowing that no matter how hard he worked, what awaited him was a ruined reputation? His hopes forever extinguished. Moran closed his eyes. The sea breeze washed over his face, the dawn light gilding his lashes. He remembered Shishuanlin's courtyard. Farewell to the 3 lifetimes. One sip of Mengpo's soup bids farewell to 3 lifetimes of memories. Could Shishuanglin have given his home such a name on a mere whim? I mean, that is the question we've all been asking, is like, who's the person who knows Moran's past? Because I'm pretty sure there's someone. Oh. There was also the question of what had happened in Moran's previous lifetime. Back then, Shizun had similarly sequestered himself within Rufeng's sect, and his goals ought to have been no different than they were in this one. But in that life, he had died amidst the beacon fires to save Ye Wangxi. Shizun had given her the name Wangxi, to forget the past. But what was he trying to forget? Had he once tried to forget those unjust, unfair times? To forget the hatred and glory of the past? To forget each and every repulsive face in his memory? And the corpse that Shizun had gone to such great lengths to drag out of the infinite hells. Luo Fenghua's corpse. What did he need the corpse for? In the illusion, Shizun had told Nanggong Liu that the curse on the ring could be broken by obtaining the caster's spiritual call. But it seemed, considering the outcome, that Shizun hadn't intended to help Nanggong Liu get rid of the curse at all. The Heavenly Rift and Zhenlong chess formation rebirth, and there was the hand that had reached out of the rift at the end of those events. Moran vaguely felt that something wasn't right. His brows knitted tighter as he mulled it over. All of a sudden his eyes flew open. He remembered. Years ago, by Jincheng Lake, the ancient dragon Wang Yi had said before his death that mysterious person used the Heartblack Willow's power in Jincheng Lake to practice two secret techniques. The first was rebirth, and the second was the Zhenlong chess formation. There had been no mention of the space-time gate of life and death. If Wang Yi was to be believed, Shizun had only cared about learning the techniques of rebirth and Zhenlong chess formation. The benefits of the latter were obvious. Controlling chess pieces would make executing his schemes much easier. But what about rebirth? Whom did he want to bring back to life? That is a very fair question. I forgot about the fact that he wanted to learn about rebirth. Was he in love with Nanggong's mother? Maybe? That feels a bit far-fetched. Sorry, where were we? After some thought, Moran felt that there were two options, Rongyan and Luo Fenghua. Shizun had implied that Rongyan actually favored him in love but had turned her back on Shizun for reasons unknown and ultimately married his brother. But upon further consideration, Moran concluded that she couldn't be the one. If Shizun was really in love with Rongyan, such that he'd do anything to revive her, why would he have murdered her only son in the previous lifetime? Besides, he had spent years by Nanggong Liu's side, disguised as this Shuanglin elder. If he'd wanted to use the rebirth technique for the sake of Rongyan, why did he not simply prevent her from being sacrificed at Jincheng Lake in the first place? That is fair, because he kind of not instigated it, but he definitely encouraged it. So why would he encourage the death of someone that he supposedly loved? So it wasn't Rongyan. Moran turned to gaze at the ocean dyed red by the rising sun, its crashing waves surging without pause. Following the sun's eastern ascent, the tide swelled, eating up the sand as Moran watched. Framed between heaven and earth was a vision of golden splendor. It had to be Luo Fenghua. Moran was certain of it. The person Nanggong Xue wanted to revive was Luo Fenghua. Rufeng sect's affairs were the opposite of simple. no matter how they appeared on the surface. They were much like the rise and fall of the sea. The broken cowries and the starfish with their brilliant, dangerous colors all disappeared beneath the churning waves of dawn. As the tide rolled in, the waves swept away the pebbles and spread over the shoal he was walking on. Feeling a sudden chill beneath his soles, Moran looked down and saw that the surf had risen to beat against the tops of his feet. As he wiggled his shapely toes, he felt a little cold and turned to head back to the beach for his shoes. But as soon as he looked back, he saw that Chuaning had walked over to join him. Set against a sky full of rosy clouds, he bore a mild expression and carried in one hand the shoes and socks Moran had tossed upon the sand. He handed Moran his shoes. "It's too cold to be walking around barefoot." Moran followed him to the top of the dune and lowered himself down next to the same craggy boulders on the shore. He brushed sand from his feet and put his shoes back on. Suddenly, he felt rather comforted, even if he never received the kind of love he wanted from Chuaning in this lifetime. Chuaning was still the best Shizun in the world. He cared for Moran and looked after him. When Chuaning saw him walking barefoot, he worried Moran would catch a cold. Yeah, I have to say that is like weirdly domestic. Like, it was just very cute and like considerate of Chuaning. And it's sad because it makes you think if time could be redone and Shuangling, like the Shuanglin elder could get his second chance, would it go better the same way that it's going better for Moran? Or would it go worse in a different way? Okay, what do you make of the affair at Rufeng Sect? Chuaning asked. "It's more complicated than it looks." "I agree." Chuaning's brows had hardly smoothed once since the events of last night. Despite the calm of the moment, his forehead still creased with worry. Seeing that Moran had put on his socks and shoes, he turned again towards the vast ocean. The sun burnished the water's surface a brilliant red gold. It was hard to tell where the sunrise ended and the distant conflagration in Linyi began. "It'll be difficult to track Shishuanlin through the space rift," said Chuaning. "If he hides and covers his trail well, a decade could pass before we catch sight of him again." Moran shook his head. "He won't wait a decade. After he recovers his strength, he'll definitely make his move." "What makes you think so?" Moran explained his theory, then added, "The corpse of Luo Fenghua we saw isn't real flesh and blood. It's merely an artificial body reconstructed in the infinite hells. After it exits the ghost realm, it'll rot quickly without a supply of yin energy. I'm guessing he'll show himself again within a year, even if he's not completely prepared." A year is still a pretty damn long time, in my opinion. Like, it's too short for you guys to really do anything, but at the same time, it's too long for it to be like, okay, we can constantly be on our guard. Chuaning didn't reply. He had always been exceedingly cautious in both thought and action. Unlike Moran, it wasn't his way to make bold conjectures regarding something so amorphous. But as he listened, he felt perhaps there was no harm in doing some guesswork. "What about that hand?" Chuaning asked. "What do you think about the hand that pulled Nang Gongxie away?" Moran shook his head. I'm not well read on the first forbidden technique, so it's hard to say. I don't know. These words were untrue. Even if Moran no longer wanted to lie to Chuaning, there remained some things he simply couldn't say, that he didn't dare to say. For as long as he could remember, the days of peace he had been afforded were so pitifully few, likely totaling less than a year over the course of 2 lifetimes. If someone who had spent decades adrift was suddenly sat before a bonfire with a pot of hot tea, how could he bear to step away? How could he bear to shatter the sweet dream with his own hands? So he could only say, I don't know. But his heart stirred restlessly. Even if they knew whose hand it was, that wouldn't solve the mystery. Why hadn't the past lives Shu Shuanglin also gathered 5 elemental spiritual essences and slaughtered all who opposed him? One could assume, from how things played out, that Shu Shuangling wouldn't have figured out how to resurrect Lo Fenghua at all unless someone who was himself reborn had enticed him, led him astray. Years ago at Jinqiang Lake, Shu Shuanglin's white chess piece had said to Chuaning, if you think that I'm the only one in this world who knows the 3 forbidden techniques, then I'm afraid you won't have much longer to live. Moran reasoned that Shu Shuanglin must know someone who had come to this world from another. At the same time, he was fairly certain Shu Shuanglin didn't know that Moran himself had been reborn. Okay. So he doesn't know that Moran was reborn, but he would know about the past Moran. Like Moran's past actions. Otherwise, why hadn't he revealed Moran's origins when they clashed at Wufeng Sect? He would have needed only capture some of Moran's memories in the scroll and expose them in the inferno. No amount of Chuaning's goodwill could endure that. He'd probably disown Moran as his disciple on the spot, and then it would be all over for Moya, who would never rise from such a fall again. That is a terrifying thing to put out as a potential thing, which we know it's probably going to happen because Chuaning has had those dreams. He obviously doesn't know that there are different lifetimes memories, but the idea of him finding out has already been toyed with, but it still terrifies me. Why hadn't Shu Shuanglin done this? There were 2 possibilities. 1, because he wasn't able to, for one reason or another. 2, because he didn't know Moran's secrets. In any case, there was no action Moran could take. He didn't have enough information. If his opponents covered their tracks carefully, Moran could only stand and wait for that gleaming, cold knife to come at his back at any moment. Moran pursed his lips and lowered his thick lashes with a slight flutter. There was only so much he could do. In the past life, consumed by a selfish vengeance, he had committed too many outrageous deeds. In this life, he wanted to try his best to live each day well, no matter the outcome, to repay the people whom he owed debts to, and to protect his Shizun. Shimei, Shumeng, and all of Session Peak. He wanted to try his best to hold on to that brief warmth he'd never before experienced. As Moran was lost in thought, a fisherman rushed over. Esteemed cultivators, bad news, he cried. Startled, Moran sprang off one hand and leapt to his feet. What happened? The head of our island's merchant family just returned this morning from being out at sea for several days. When the village elder explained the situation, she was awfully unhappy with how he'd handled it. She threw a fit and she said she wouldn't let the children and elders stay in the vacant rooms. She's already kicked them out. Everyone you brought is standing outside. The fisherman was a gentle soul as he spoke. His eyes grew teary. Those poor people. It's such a cold day, and she's not even willing to spare a coat or a blanket. The merchant also said. Chuaning also stood, his expression dark. What else did she say? She also said that since those people from Linyi ate Flying Flower Isle's rations and drank Flying Flower Isle's water, she's going to charge them for every last copper. And if they can't afford it, then she'll round them up and keep them on Flying Flower Isle as slaves. Well, she sounds like a piece of work. It's kind of giving me like that family that. Oh wait, no, I'm thinking of this Villain self-saving system, but like the family that made Shen Qingqie, the original Shen Qingqie's life a misery. Am I making sense? I feel like I'm just saying words. Oh. Before he'd finished, Chuaning was storming off towards the center of the island in a whirl of pale blue robes. I hope he scares her. Okay, I'm gonna take my break now because we're at the end of a chapter, so I feel like that's probably a good time to do it now, and then I'll be back in 10 minutes, so at like 3 past. I just also need to give my voice a little bit of a break. I'm hoping we can do a full another hour though. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry for the wait as well. Okay, we are back. I just kind of want to immediately jump into it since I did take longer than I was expecting. Okay. I don't want to know what to make of this chapter title. So, we are on page 223 for anyone who wants to find their place in their book again, and it is chapter 174, Shizun's brocade pouch. Okay, anyway. Flying Flower Isle might have been poor, but its wealthiest merchants had clearly enjoyed some success and lived in ostentatious luxury. The woman was attired in a loose satin robe, spangled all over with golden bat motif, which she wore under a coat made of top-grade snow silk from Kunlun Tashir Palace. I mean, that already doesn't sound like we're supposed to like her. Her long, grey-streaked hair was pulled sleekly back and adorned with exquisite hairpins inlaid with kingfisher feathers and flowers made of strung-together pearls. That does sound beautiful, though. Her eyebrows were drawn in using opulent pigment from conch shells. Her skin was powdered and oiled, and her lips were daubed with crimson. A delicate strand of pearls encircled her neck, and a pair of gleaming golden earrings set with rubies the size of pigeons' eggs swung ponderously from her earlobes. That started out sounding beautiful, and then it just sounds like there's too much going on. She was over 50 at a glance, her youth long faded, an impression reinforced by a rather stout figure and deeply lined face. With some tasteful styling, she would have looked well enough, but she clearly thought her beauty proportional to the number of luxurious items she wore. That's quite an interesting description. Consequently, beneath this pile of jewels, she resembled nothing as much as a miserable old turtle garnished with red uh, chilies and green onions. Oh my goodness, okay. This cunning merchant owned a full half of the land on the small Flying Flower Isle. Even the village elders didn't dare say a word against her. As the sun climbed into the sky, she strolled into the public square. A red wood taishi chair, carved with bats and deers, had already been set out for her. She took a seat and studied the refugees from Leni. What were you thinking? She raised heavy-lidded eyes to shoot a calculating glance at the village elder. They haven't paid a single copper, yet you've given them rooms? And there is the matter of food. How much have they eaten? Not much. It was only leftovers from the villagers. Things they couldn't finish, the village elder mumbled. The merchant snorted prissily. You still ought to charge for it. Was this rice and wheat not grown on my land? Seeing as the harvest was poor this year, I provided every family with 10 caddies of barley flour and a jar of oil for my own storehouse. Now, I don't mind feeding you, we're all islanders here, but surely you'd think twice before giving away third lady son's grain to these refugees from Ligny. This is frustrating. Because the logical side of me kind of sees something of where she's coming from, but the emotional side of me hates every single bit of this. There was something that was bothering me though. Oh, not bothering. I don't think this is where this chapter is going, but there was a brief moment where I was like, imagine she like falls for one of them, falls for either Moran or Chuaning. It's like, okay, well, in exchange for this help, one of you can marry me or something like that. And my brain went in like a tangent direction of, okay, but if that were to happen, I kind of would love for it to be Chuaning, because he would make it so funny. Like, he'd be so awkward about it and so standoffish about it, and then we get to see Moran jealous, but in a way that like he can't, that isn't really typical for him. I don't know, I just thought that it'd be funny. um Third lady is correct, of course, the village elder smiled. But look, don't you feel pity for these little girls and old men out here in the cold? You're a kind soul, so why not let it go? The merchant opened her beady eyes wide. Let it go? How could I? Money makes the world go round, you know. The village elder was rendered speechless. How much did each family give them to eat? The merchant asked. I've asked you to tally the amount. Are you done yet? The village elder replied helplessly. Yes, we've counted everything. He held out a small booklet for the merchant. Third lady's son, for the merchant, third lady's son. With a raucous jangle, third lady's son raised her hand. She sported 9 colourful bracelets on her right wrist alone, gold, silver, and jade bangles inlaid with assorted gemstones covered nearly half of her forearm. I mean, she looks quite pretty. I feel like the artist did a really good job with her. We get the vibe, but it doesn't. I don't feel like the artist did her an injustice or anything like that. Hmm. She leafed lazily through the booklet, then closed it. After making a few calculations on her fingers, she pronounced, "Such gluttons." Dramatics. All of you must have been born in the year of the pig. You've wolfed down 26 of the island's mantua. Our mantua are quite large, so 90 silver is more than reasonable. Excuse you, and also I'm born in the year of the pig, so I take offense to that. I think I'm born in the year of the pig, if I'm not misremembering. You drank half a vat of fresh water, which I brought over from Ligny myself. Then technically, they should get first dibs of it, because it's Ligny's water. Um, I brought each vat for 3 gold, so with the transportation cost included, I'll send them to you for 4 gold each. That's 2 gold for half. So that'll be 2 gold, 90 silver in total. One more thing. Zhang Jie, the kindly looking woman whom she had addressed, jumped and looked up. Ah, the third lady. Third lady's son smiled. The mantua you make are so delicious because you add lard to the dough. She's really like being nitpicky. Um, that must also be accounted for. I only used a tiny dab of lard for 10 mantua. How could I account for such a small amount? What's so hard about it? 10 mantua, a dab of lard. I'll charge 1 copper coin for the lot. That's very fair. The other woman stared silently. So that's 2 gold, 90 silver, and 1 copper altogether, said third lady's son. Plus, you're all sleeping in rooms on my land. The rooms might not be mine, but the land most assuredly is. You slept for an hour, so that'll be 70 coppers per person. She turned to the attendant next to her. How many refugees are there? Third lady. There are 49 in total. That's not right. Where is the 51? Weren't there 51 before? Where are the other 2? Before her words had faded, she heard a low voice answer, "Right here." Ooh, I kind of want to see some fighting words right now, not gonna lie. Like, I get she's a businesswoman and girl bossing her way too close to the sun, but still. Sun. That's ironic considering her surname. Anyway, although Chuaning wore robes of silver blue instead of his customary white, he looked as frostily imposing as ever. His elegant phoenix eyes were bright and clear, his pupils haughty and cold as an unsheathed dagger. Third Lady Sun was a commoner, but cultivators didn't frighten her. She had been a businesswoman for most of her life, fussing over and haggling for every coin. But all her operations were above board, and she had always stayed clear of evildoers. Okay, that's respectable at least. She said evenly, "I see you're a cultivator, so it's no wonder you don't need to sleep. You're the one who rescued these people and brought them here, right? You've come just in time. Hurry and hand over the money." "Third Lady, these 2 aren't from Rufung's sect," the village elder said in a low voice. "They're cultivators from Station Peak. You needn't be so—" I don't think she cares much about that. I don't care what sect they're from. I answer to coin, not people." Chuaning glanced at the shivering refugees huddled together in the cold. With a wave of his hand, he brought down a red gold barrier to keep out the chill. Then he turned. "How much are you asking?" 2 gold, 93 silver, and 430 copper. Loathsome for Third Lady Sun might be, but they had nowhere else to go. Chuaning understood that if he crossed her, consequences would fall not on him, but on those he'd brought here. Face sullen, he fished his money bag from his chenkun pouch and tossed it to her. There was about 80 gold in there. Most of his money was still with Shusheng. He didn't have much on him. "We'll stay for 7 days or so. See if that's enough." "It's not." Third Lady Sun would never lift a finger herself. She summarily passed the bag to her assistant to count the money. 80 gold. Yeesh, she sounds very greedy. Hold on. I just want to... 2 gold. 90 copper, 93 silver, and 430 copper. Let's say 100 silver is the amount that you need to equate to 1 gold, right? How the hell is 80 not enough for 7 days? Somehow the math doesn't feel like it's mathing. 80 gold will cover your stay for 3 days at most, and I haven't even accounted for your cost of food. You did, though. You very clearly did. If Shenzhen isn't convinced, allow me to show you an itemized bill. A businesswoman knows money. We can go through it line by line if you like. By then, Moran had hurried over. He didn't have much money on him either. With both their finances pooled, they barely had enough to cover 4 days of food and lodging for 51 people. Third Lady Sun took the coins and drew her vivid red lips up into a smile. "You can stay for 4 days, and after that, I don't care whether the inferno's gone out. If you don't have the money, you need to go." I hate her. Like, we've dealt with so many terrible people, and she's just immediately jumped onto the blacklist. Yeah, I mean, wasn't it though? Because the thing that could drive the cost up was the sleeping time. Um, but anyway, and your refugees are breathing the air on my island, so that'll be 1 gold a minute. Seems accurate. Oh my goodness. I like again, I get it. From a business perspective, I get you need to do your hustling thing. But from a humanity perspective, I hate it. Oh, okay. In the interest of reducing their expenses, Chuaning skipped dinner that night. He cast a messenger Haitang over the sea in an attempt to contact Xu Shengyong, then returned to the little cottage he'd been assigned. The dwelling was even cruder than the one he'd stayed in during the harvest at Yuliang village. Because there wasn't much vacant housing on the island, the refugees were all crammed together. Chuaning wasn't accustomed to sharing a room with strangers, so he doubled up with Moran. The humble cottage's candle had been lit, but Moran wasn't inside. Where had he gone off to, Chuaning didn't know. Chuaning shrugged off his outer robe. It was a luxurious garment, to be sure, but the material really wasn't any finer than the everyday white he favoured, and was by now stained with blood and ash from the apocalyptic fire. He had filled a wooden bucket with hot water and was about to start washing when the door creaked. I can't remember, but I don't think the last time he tried to do his own washing was a success, so now I'm honestly scared for that poor garment. Chuaning looked up at Moran. Where'd you go? It's late. Moran stepped into the room with a with a woven bamboo food box stuck, tucked into his robe to protect against the chill wind. He met Chuaning's gaze, the tip of his nose red from the cold, and grinned. I went to the lady's manor to beg for food. Chuaning stared at him. You went to beg for food? Just kidding, Moran said. I did bring some dinner. What is it? Mantou? Moran looked apologetic. And a bowl of fish soup and red braised pork. No dessert, unfortunately. The third lady's son was staring me down, and all the villagers are scared of her, so no one dared give me more. I went to her manor and traded my silver dagger for this. You didn't need to do that, Chuaning. Oh, Moran, I feel like Chuaning would have preferred you kept the dagger. Chuaning frowned. That woman is heartless. I remember that dagger. There's a spiritual stone set in the hilt. How did you get so little for it? It wasn't just this. I haggled for 51 meals, one for everyone. I watched the kitchen send them out, Moran said with a smile. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about it. So don't worry about the others, Shizun. Just eat up. Chuaning really was quite hungry. I mean, you guys went through a hell of a lot. It makes sense that your body might need some food. He sat at the table and applied himself to the hot fish soup before nibbling on the mantua and raised pork. Third Lady's son was a stingy woman, so the meat was both meagre and greasy, not at all to Chuaning's taste. But the steamed bun dipped in soup wasn't bad at all. After he finished one, he started on his second. Moran glanced at the steaming bucket of water. Shizun, you're doing laundry? He asked. If it's just your outer robe, I can wash it for you. There's no need. I can do it myself. Can you though? I don't know if I trust you. It's fine. I want to do my laundry anyway, so this is perfect, said Moran. He stepped over to the bed to grab the clothes he'd changed out of earlier and hauled the wooden bucket outside. As he looked up at the bright moon in the courtyard, Moran wondered how Shumeng, his uncle, and the rest were doing, and where Yewangxi and Nangongsi were now. I haven't even had time to worry about them. Oh goodness. He gazed out to sea, toward the great inferno still surging like a bloody tide, smoke scorching the heavens. He wondered about Song Chutong, and also about that other person, the one for whom he'd harbored such bone-deep hatred that he'd slaughtered every soul in Rufeng sect in the past life. Both had probably lost their lives in the sea of flames. I mean, Song Chitong has a lot of luck on her side. I'm not gonna count her as dead yet. I need to see the body first. Or the ashes. Whoa, that went dark really quickly, sorry. Yeah, Chuaning and Lan Shichen can join the Can't Do Laundry Club. Yeah. Oh goodness. Moran heaved a sigh and set the thought aside. He put down the wooden bucket, added some cold water from the cistern, and rolled up his sleeves to wash the clothes. When it came to assembling automatons or writing scrolls, Chuaning was thorough and methodical to a fault. But it all went to shambles as soon as he attempted such domestic tasks as laundry or cooking. For instance, Moran always checked his own pockets and Chen-kun pouch before soaking his clothes to ensure nothing important got wet, but Chuaning often forgot this mundane step. Moran mutely fished item after random item out of Chuaning's robes. That's so endearing. Why is that so endearing? Oh my goodness. What was all this? A high-tongue handkerchief? Okay, fairly normal. An assortment of medicines? Also reasonable. A handful of candy? That's so cute. Moran was at a loss. Upon closer inspection, he realized they were the milk candies he'd given Chuaning back in Yuliang village. How hadn't he finished them yet? He continued rummaging. A second later, Moran flinched. An exploding talisman? His face went ashen with terror as he lifted the damp paper talisman out of the water. How careless could Chuaning be? He'd just stuck this exploding talisman in his pocket without any safeguards. Even if the chances of its catching fire and self-detonating was slim, it was still appallingly risky. Was this his idea of a joke? Moran frowned and hurriedly sifted through Chuaning's clothes again. After extricating all the exploding talismans, all, implying there's multiple, freezing talisman and soul-soothing talismans, he discovered that Chuaning had even left behind the rising dragon talisman, with that tiny dragon drawing. If he hadn't checked, these paper talismans would have had a nice long soak, and most of them would have been ruined. Seriously, what was he to do with this man? Moran shook his head in exasperation and resolved never again to allow Shizun to do his own laundry. That is so endearing. Oh my word. Okay. My pockets and bag, to be honest. Oh goodness. That glance was enough. Oh wait, sorry. Just then, a small object, the soft white of lotus roots, slipped from an inner pocket. Distracted, Moran assumed it was yet another spiritual talisman. He picked it up and glanced at it briefly. That glance was enough to stop him in his tracks. What he held was an old brocade pouch embroidered with flowers of the silk tree, their once brilliant petals dimmed with age. Moran felt at once incredulous and bemused. This object seemed vaguely familiar. I also feel like I shouldn't recognize this, but I don't. He must have seen it somewhere before, long enough ago that he couldn't immediately recall where or when. As Moran rubbed the little brocade pouch, dark eyebrows knitted together, light and shadow chased each other through his eyes. Memories flitted past as he sought these blooming flowers amidst the rushing tides of time. The fine fabric, slightly cool against his fingers, had faded over the course of years. He peered at it closely as he turned it over in his hand, but the memory eluded him. Damn it. So we're not going to find out now. Because I was thinking it might be Chushun's, or something like that. But I'm assuming this is something from the past life, not necessarily something from the present one. Oh, sorry, my voice is struggling a bit. Fearing something dangerous lurking inside, another exploding talisman perhaps, He opened the pouch to take a look. He was struck dumb by what he saw. It was a lock of hair. No, upon closer examination, it was 2 locks of hair. Oh, was this not from the wedding in the first volume? Two locks of hair, tied and coiled together, inexplicably linked. Despite the passage of time, they had managed to remain intertwined, keeping each other company. What looked like a singular piece was actually 2 black locks, long loathed parts. Hair? Moran's heart fluttered as realization dawned. A brocade pouch, he muttered. Brocade pouch with silk tree flowers. Suddenly he remembered. The memory burst to life like fire in his heart, setting his whole chest aflame. His eyes flew wide in astonishment. The ghost mistress, he remembered. The golden boys and jade maidens from Butterfly. Yay, I'm so proud of myself, sorry. It feels like it's been forever since we read volume 1, so my memory is not the best. Sharing a cup of wine, the mass ceremony, cutting their hair in oath, intertwining their hair in oath. He remembered. Henceforth 2 souls shall be united, through heaven or hell never to part. He remembered. He remembered. Before Butterfly Town's ghost mistress, he and Chuaning were married in the ghost ceremony. The golden boys and jade maidens had cut from each a lock of hair and placed them together in a silk tree flower brocade pouch, which Chuaning had accepted. This right here was that very brocade pouch. But how? Moran's ears rang. His heart pounded. He was mystified. How could this be? He clutched the brocade pouch, his hand trembling minutely. An unsettling light leapt within his eyes, flashing between amazement, shock, disbelief, confusion, ecstasy, even sorrow. Shizun, Chuaning, why would he have kept it? I mean, that is the question, Moran. Why don't you go to work figuring that out? Uh-oh, Chuaning is busted. I'm very happy about it. Okay, chapter 175. Shizun, do you like me? Oh my word, is our dumb Husky actually gonna put the pieces together? I'd be so proud of him. And kind of surprised at the same time. Chuaning was starting in on the last mentor when the door swung open behind him. Moran entered carrying a pile of objects that he placed on the bed. Shizun, there were some talismans and other things that you didn't take out of your outer robe. I'll put them here for you, Moran said. Without looking up, he turned and left again. Truth be told, he really didn't have the courage to ask Chuaning about the brocade pouch. No matter Chuaning's response, he couldn't imagine such a conversation would be anything but unbearably awkward. And this was to say nothing of Chuaning's thin face and Moran's own clumsy way with words. What was he to do if he put his foot in his mouth and upset Chuaning? You know, fair concern, I will give you that. Moran pursed his lips. His dark eyes glinted and flashed, but his thoughts were scattered and confused. Like a bolt from the blue, an unspeakable, outrageous idea popped into his head. Could it be that Chuaning actually liked him? Shocked by the sheer audacity of this fancy, Moran rapidly shook his head. No way, no way, he mumbled. Here was a perfect illustration of the inability to see the forest for the trees. Moran was far too deep into the woods. Had this brocade pouch belonged to someone Moran didn't care for at all, a random female cultivator, for example, he would have divined her feelings in an instant. Who would keep a brocade pouch with a lock of another's hair intertwined with their own, and for so many years, unless they liked them? In principle, it was a very straightforward scenario. But because Chuaning was involved, Moran doubted himself at every turn. I mean, that is fair. And especially because he has such a distorted view of Chuaning, like, he's getting to a point where he's more and more able to see Chuaning for who he truly is, and not who he's made him out to be, but it's still a work in progress. People were like this. The more they cared for someone, the more prone their imagination was to run wild. Normally intelligent people would become fools and have no idea what to do with themselves. A single glance from the objects of their affections would send them into deep obsession for a day or more, and a moment's silence would prompt them to embark on a painstaking investigation into the meaning hidden within. Moran would compulsively overthink the simplest of situations, carefully tasting each and every detail in search of the most elusive of flavors. Had he gotten it wrong? Had he misunderstood? Had Chuaning merely forgotten to throw the thing out? For 5+ years? Yeah, totally, definitely, that is a thing. I say as if I don't hoard every single battery just in case it might have power left. But I know that's not equivalent. Um, the problem was so elementary that anyone could have figured it out with their big toe, but Moran was stuck on it for ages. Worries filled his wandering thoughts as he absent-mindedly washed the clothes in the bucket. He scrubbed and scrubbed, the water growing colder and colder as his heart burned hotter and hotter. Moran found himself staring up at the cottage. Rich golden candlelight shone through the paper of the window in its squat frame of aged wood. The flame flickered, dark one moment, bright the next, not unlike the tender shoot that had sprouted in Moran's heart, shivering and swaying. If Chuaning really liked him. Once Moran had been the unabashed, thick-skinned Emperor Taishan Jin, but now even this fleeting thought was enough to make him blush. He felt hot, his throat dry. It was a thirst no water could slake. The only thing that could ease the parched heat within him was the man inside that room. Only the sweetness of his mouth could soothe Moran and bring him a moment of respite. Only the very man Moran had sworn up and down to cherish, protect, and respect. Respect! Moran felt his burning chest had been splashed with water. He had always brandished the word to warn and rebuke himself whenever his ardent desire for Chuaning threatened to overmaster him. But things were different tonight. The brocade pouch was like a bundle of dry pine kindling thrown onto the fire in his heart, fuel of his wildest fantasies. This is a mess, but also we just had a murderous fire kill 1,000 people, so maybe don't equate your heart's desire to fire right now. I'm still a little bit sensitive. Okay. Respect. You need to respect him, Moran chanted to himself, but the words were as futile as trying to douse a burning cart of firewood with a single cup of water. Those words had once quelled his yearnings. Now those same thoughts roared up into towering flames, instantly transforming that cup of cold water into curls of steam that misted his vision. Moran found, much to his surprise, that this incantation of "you need to respect him" was finally rendered completely, utterly ineffective. Hi! Where was I? Oh. Inside, Chuaning polished off the last mantua. Thinking to wipe his fingers, he crossed to the bed and plucked the high-tongue handkerchief out of the pile of odds and ends. He sighed, inwardly lamenting his lousy memory. He couldn't even remember to take the stuff out of his robes before washing them. Now he'd made a fool of himself in front of Moran, and who knew if he... Before he'd completed the thought, he spied a fine red cord peeking from beneath the small mound of talismans. His heart stuttered. He reached for the red cord to take a closer look, but his hand froze midway, stalled by fear. After a moment's hovering, he drew his hand back and slipped his fingers beneath his lapels to check the spot right next to his heart. Guys, this is gonna be a mess. His face instantly fell. The silk tree flower brocade pouch was missing. Chuaning's expression was unsightly. He stood in shock for a beat as he realized what had happened. The interior pocket of the formal robes Zhengyong had commissioned was slightly angled. Chuaning had always kept the brocade pouch from the ghost ceremony within his innermost robe, but he had worried it might accidentally slip out with the angle and how smooth the robe's texture was. Thus he had removed it to the pocket of his outer robe. The scandal. What are you doing? We are reading a danmei called The Husky and His White Cat Shizun. We are on volume 5, and it's about to get spicy, I feel. He considered the heap of oddments with mounting panic. All the candy and other miscellaneous little items were piled on top, with the talismans stacked beneath. The red cord was right at the bottom. That it was so obviously hidden, made it all the more conspicuous, as though the person who tried to hide it was saying, "I didn't see it, I didn't see anything at all," while waving his hands and blushing furiously. Oh no, why are you being insightful now, Chuaning? You can't see anything about Moran's feelings for you in other situations. Oh. After a lengthy silence, Chuaning reached for the end of the cord. He held his breath, clinging to his last thread of hope, and tugged the brocade pouch free from the jumble of talismans. Ah, of course. The red cord of the brocade pouch had been tampered with. The knot was not the one he always used. Damn it! Try as Chuaning might to stay calm, his fair skin flushed and his ears turned so red they looked ready to drip blood. He loosened the cord and opened the pouch. The 2 locks of inky black hair had lain intertwined for so many years, too like the hidden feelings that had wound round his heart just as long. Now they tumbled starkly into the warm yellow candlelight, soft and supple in his hand. Moran had seen his brocade pouch, and afterward he had buried it under all this random junk, obviously trying to pretend he'd seen nothing at all. The knowledge set on an explosion in Chuaning's head. His heart pounded and his mind raced madly, his face burning like red-hot coals. What to do? Had Moran realized the feelings he had tried so hard to hide? He was done for. Moran liked Jing. Oh damn, I completely forgot, Chuaning is still completely in the dark about Moran. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't have forgotten, because he never stated it, and also, if, say Moran was like, "Oh, I'm not interested in Shimei anymore," Chuaning might wonder who he is interested in now to make him change his mind. And then a confession would be close by. So, okay. If Moran discovered what Chuaning felt for him, he would definitely be scared off. Would the newly gentle and warm relationship that had sprung up between them then crumble? Chuaning's thoughts were a mess as he clutched the brocade pouch. It was a long time before he was able to calm himself. He could only hope Moran hadn't figured it out. He gambled on his established reputation of being clear of heart and free of desire, and hoped Moran hadn't realized anything at all. When someone's year-long crush was discovered by the object of their affection, it would normally be a cause for joy. I mean, I don't think most people would be happy about it, because if it's a crush, usually it's because the person's not brave enough to say anything or fears being rejected. A kind of liberation. That wasn't quite the case for Chuaning. He was 32 already, and long since used to being alone. Moran and Shimei were in the most shining years of their youth, but Chuaning had spent those years of his life in solitude. It never occurred to him, now that he was in his 30s, that any chance remained for him to find true love and companionship. That is so sad. After all, to begin a relationship, one would first inevitably have to divulge their feelings. Yet this came with the terrible, grievous risk of rejection, and we've established how thin Chuaning's face is. Chuaning tucked the brocade pouch away. He paced back and forth in the room, eventually coming to a stop before the bronze mirror. He gazed up into it. Years of disuse had left a thick layer of dust on the mirror's surface, and he could only make out a blurry outline. He reached up and wiped his hand across the mirror. Amidst the grime appeared a face that was far from perfect. The corner of his eyes landed exactly on a scratch in the mirror. Chuaning blinked at himself. Hideous. You're so unkind to yourself, Chuaning, like damn. He suddenly felt so annoyed, so disappointed with the person looking back at him. Why do I look like this? Moran, he knew, liked men who were young, gentle, and pretty. Chuaning managed to be precisely none of those things. His face was unlined, but he couldn't hide the weight time's passage had wrought upon his features. He had always been mature beyond his years, and now he had no hint of youthful passion remaining. How could he have the nerve to be with a young person? His own disciple, no less. If word got out, never mind his own reputation, it would be deeply embarrassing for Moran and Sir Peak. And there was Shi Mingjing, whose incomparable loveliness had only grown during the 5 years Chuaning had spent in slumber. Even when he wasn't smiling, his gentle, curved eyes were like luminous peach blossoms. Chuaning looked again at his reflection. The face looking back was surly and arrogant. Between the two of them, only an idiot would pick Chuaning. Well, luckily the book is called Dumb Husky and His White Cat Shizun, or like the manga is called that. So you're, as I said, in luck, you're fine. It's not called The Very Brilliant, Clever Cat, or Dog and His White Cat Shizun. It's fine. Okay. Chuaning inspected the hazy yellow mirror. He could reserve the passage of time and induce this ugly face in the mirror to fall in love while in his 20s. He might have harnessed the vitality of his youth to rashly confess his feelings. Even if he came out worse for wear, he would have survived. But he was now over 30. His youth had fled. I'm 29. I don't feel good about this. His youth had fled, leaving behind only his wretched, weary, unkind self, along with a ferocious face that frightened children to tears. Oh goodness. The sad thing is it literally just happened, so you can't even be like, no, Chuaning, you're overthinking. Moran was in the best years of his life, and Shimei was a beauty who could topple nations. As for Chuaning, he was just some unpleasant man who would never be young again. Oh, goodness. He didn't dare ask for anything. He only wanted to hide. He only wanted to continue like this, slow and steady. He wouldn't dare to entertain thoughts of reciprocation. If he could be allowed to quietly harbor these unrequited feelings, to like someone in secret, to treat that person well in his role as the Shizun, don't make me cry, Chuaning, then that would be enough, he thought. He would be quite satisfied. A creak sounded behind him. Chuaning didn't turn. Within the bronze mirror, he saw Moran enter the cottage, carrying a wooden bucket. Neither spoke. The mirror was hazy, so Chuaning could only make out a tall figure standing in the entryway. He couldn't see the expression Moran wore, or make out the shades of emotion within his gaze. Despite admonishing himself repeatedly to remain calm, Chuaning couldn't stop his heartbeat from quickening. He didn't want Moran to see his look of embarrassment, so he untied his ponytail and held the ribbon between his teeth. Dipping his head, he made a show of putting his hair back up before the mirror. Chuaning thought himself very clever. With the ribbon in his mouth, he had the perfect excuse to avoid greeting Moran. So, fingers brushed the back of Chuaning's ear. Okay? He froze instantly in place. Though he tried to suppress it, a small shudder rippled through him. Okay. Chuaning was unaccustomed to physical contact to begin with, and here was Moran touching his ear. Moran's large, rough palm skimming the tender skin of his earlobe. Though it lasted but an instant, the contact made Chuaning's back tingle all the way up his spine. He looked studiously at the ground. If he raised his head now, he feared Moran would see that his face was unusually flushed, even through the dimness of the room and the haziness of the bronze mirror. Ooh. Okay, where are we at? Vampire Chuaning thinking he's lived for centuries. He's talking like he's 132. Yeah, no, it's... I get he's seen a lot of life, but also he's making me feel very old. He bit down on the hair ribbon and mastered himself with great effort. You're done with the laundry? Moran's voice was low and very slightly husky. Chuaning felt him lean in. The chill air lingered on Moran, but it couldn't mask the sharply masculine scent radiating from him. It was enough to make Chuaning's head spin. His thoughts blurred and slowed to a stop. Moran brushed back the stray wisps of hair at Chuaning's temple. Shizun, just now, His words faltered. Chuaning waited. What was Moran trying to say? As he held the ribbon between his teeth, his eyes downcast, his heartbeat seemed to stall. Whatever Moran wanted to say seemed too difficult to speak aloud. After a pause, he changed the subject. Forget it. It's nothing. Are you putting your hair back up? It's late. Chuaning didn't reply. His singular thought was that Moran was standing entirely too close to him. It was too hot. Are you going out? Moran asked. No. I was just going to wash the dishes, replied Chuaning. I'll help. My hands work fine, Chuaning shot back. Moran laughed awkwardly behind him, as if he didn't know what else to say. Shizun's hands work fine, but they're clumsy sometimes. I'm worried you'll break a dish. Yeah, and with your guys' luck, Third Lady Sun will charge you for that as well. So, Chuaning, step aside and let the master take over, please. Chuaning couldn't muster a response. Noticing his silence, Moran thought he was annoyed. He reined his smile in and said earnestly, The water is cold outside. Remember to bring out some warm water and mix it in. The hum of Chuaning's reply sounded like both and unclear yet undeniably pleasant to the ear. The sound roused that tender sprout in Moran's chest, urging it to grow faster. His throat bobbed slightly, and his shadowy gaze landed on the sliver of pale neck that showed over Chuaning's collar when he lowered his head. He felt the same vexatious thirst and swallowed on reflex, though he did so quietly as possible, not wanting Chuaning to hear. Moran took a deep breath and forced a smile. This mirror is so blurry. I mean, it's better that way, otherwise he would have seen you staring at his neck. It hasn't been used for a long time. How can Shizun even see himself? Give me the ribbon. I'll comb your hair for you. With the length of the lilac silk still held between his teeth, Chuaning had no chance to demur before Moran grabbed the ribbon. It would be too strange to keep biting down on it, so he resentfully let go and allowed Moran to help him tie his ponytail. Feigning ignorance, he snorted. Do you even know how? If you don't tie it right, I'll have to redo it anyway. Shizun, have you forgotten? At Peach Blossom Springs, I always tied your hair for you. When he was Shazani, right? Oh goodness. Chuaning fell silent at once. His stint as Shazani was a humiliating experience. A humiliating piece of his past that he had no desire to revisit. He closed his eyes and scowled, letting Moran comb out his hair. But with every stroke, Moran's palm lightly brushed against his ear. He felt horribly uncomfortable, his scalp numb and his throat dry, and his scowl grew deeper. Are you just about finished? Moran's chest rumbled with a deep laugh. Ah, you're always so impatient. Don't worry, I'm almost done. His voice seemed even closer than before, like it was coming from just behind Chuaning's ear. Chuaning found himself clenching his fist within his sleeves. Perhaps it was his delusion. He felt that Moran's breathing was a little heavy, like a wild beast readying itself before it pounced on its prey. Chuaning had the prickling sensation of being watched, as if a ravenous tiger crouched behind him, preparing at any moment to pin him against the bronze mirror, tear open his throat, and lap up the blood that spilled from his veins. Damn! That's a bit intense, Chuaning. Such perceptions could at times be strangely accurate. It was just that Chuaning's self-esteem was too low for him to credit his senses. Oh goodness. How was he to know that if only he looked up, he would see Moran's eyes in the mirror, bright yet shadowed, desire and reason clashing within, full of sparks and smoke. As Moran grasped the sleek silk ribbon, the clear-headed part of him commanded his body to diligently tie up Chuaning's hair, but the darker half of his soul was gripped by fretful thoughts. What am I doing? Tying a ribbon? But this ribbon is being tied in the wrong place. He felt that he should be shoving Chuaning against the dilapidated dressing table, using the ribbon to blindfold him with one hand, while gripping his chin with the other. This man is kinky as all hell. I'll just say that. He should be kissing him ferociously, pressing him down to taste the sweetness of his mouth and sucking on the soft tip of his tongue. Clearly, he should be nuzzling at Chuaning's ear and licking the tiny mole behind it. He should be breathing heavily against the shell of his ear and asking softly, Chuaning, my dear Shizun, why did you keep the brocade sorry, that is not romantic at all. Brocade pouch. Waning. Do you like me? So painful was his yearning that he felt his heart would split open. His blood coursed scaldingly hot through his veins as his eyes burned red. That's not intense at all. What is this title? Okay, so we're gonna end it here, but let me just treat you guys to the title that we're gonna be starting with in the next read along. Chapter 176. Shizun, why don't you buy me? What's gonna happen? Like, that sounds concerning. And also, like, third lady son might be involved somehow. Okay, I am done for the night, but I hope you guys still enjoyed. And I think we actually did a good amount. I feel like I might be a bit wrong about that. Actually, yeah, we did okay. We might actually be able to finish the volume in the next live. And then I'm still deciding if I'm gonna just break on next Thursday if we do finish with the volume on Tuesday. But then we're moving back to Modu for a bit for volume 3. That is the plan, and then we'll have volume 6 once it comes out in August, which I'm really excited about. Okay, thank you guys again so much. I really appreciate it, and I will see you on Tuesday. 再见。